back on the EP3. What we need to do today is raise this car up, which is counter to what most people do to this car, but if you wanted to put lowering springs on, this is pretty much the same process, but I'm actually taking off lowering springs and putting back the car to standard ride height because the driver is fed up of crashing over bumps. And if anything, unless you make some other changes with the suspension geometry, lowering these cars, especially on the front, considering they're McPherson struts, just ruins their handling, really. So I'm raising this car up to stand springs. I'll show you what they look like. So these are just the standard springs. It's got a little rubber bits in there as well, and so this is how low the car looks like at the moment. And we can look at the end, see how much it's gone up, but I think they're 30mm lowering springs, or so the person who bought them told me. Anyway, so the Apex on there at the moment. We're going back to OEM standard ones. Of course, when you put any springs on, just check that they're not missing any coils, not snapped, not damaged, whatever, and these are fine. And yeah, first things first, loosen up all the wheel nuts and then jack and support the car. With the car jacked up on axle stands, it's clear to see what needs to be removed to get the shock off, and then we can get the spring off. So here you can see it's McPherson strut in the front, so we need to remove the bolts that tie this into the hub. So it's these two here. We need to remove anything that's holding on to this as well. So say for example the this brake line, we don't split the brake line, we just need to remove the bracket, this bolt down here that's holding it on. This is the ABS centre cable, so just again remove that. We don't need to split it, we just need to undo anything that's holding on to it. Then we need to undo this, which is the track rod end, and then on top, once we've done all this, we can remove the top retaining nuts, the strut tower. So that's what I'm going to end up getting to do. So here's the 12mm brake flexi line mounting bracket bolt you need to remove. So this is on a 12mm. You can get a breaker bar, and I like to just kind of crack it off like that so it comes off rather than snaps off. And then you've also got back here 10mm here. This is the just for the ABS sensor wire. Again, they can be very stiff, so I've soaked all of these bolts in WD-40 first, and then you can just crack them all off without snapping them off. The tie rod end, you can see it's on a nut there, but it's also got this little split pin holding on, so you can just unwind that with some needle nose pliers, okay, like that. So you wound both edges to the same point, pinch it in, so you have a hope in hell getting it out, and then I tend just to loop in under here and try and get some kind of levering purchase. Sometimes I just snap off though, so that's also acceptable because you're not going to reuse it anyway, so take that out. So the splits pin is out in pieces, as can quite often happen, and then we get the 17mm deep single hex and put it straight at the top, and then we will use the brake bar to crack that off. Right, so I've taken out that nut the whole way, so that's what that looks like. Then we need to get this ball joint out of it. So now we can undo these bolts that undo the upright to the strut. I consider these bolts are in the wrong way around, because I'd put the 22 on this side, because otherwise you have difficulty getting the 22mm socket. It's hard to get the 22mm in here where the brake hanger is. This brake bracket for the flexi is, so that means you have to essentially undo the bolt rather than the nut, which is always the wrong way around. So this is what I'm going to have to do this time, but I'll put it in the other way around, so the nut's on the left, and then you can get it in properly. Right, managed to get the ball joint off. Now I'm going to do the other side to show you. So this is the ball joint tools, how you want to set up. So these arms are pretty much parallel. You're in underneath the gaiter, make sure you don't split the gaiter, and then in 19mm, and then you just wind on the tension. Be careful that this thing doesn't slip out, and also give it a second between giving it some tension, because sometimes that'll be enough to force it off. These have been known to snap in the past when you put too much on. I've obviously got my nut in the bottom there just to protect the threads. If you're not convinced, that should be enough. And take some slack off and then do it again. See if we can. Said they do fly off, and this is it, it's out, which is good news. Before you take the strut of the car, 17mm single hex deep, and then just crack off that top nut, otherwise the whole top hat will spin and it will be a pain for you. So just do it before you take the strut out. So with the bottom of the suspension arm just propped up on a jack, I've taken out these two bolts completely. As you can see, this is already out, so everything's out. The flexi line, ABS sensor, track rod end, and these two bolts as well holding the hub to the strut. So then I can just go above. So the engine bay open, and the 14mm and the 3/8 deep 3/8 breaker, you can actually get into each of these, undo them. It's even a little cutout in this little tray at the back, so you can get in there, undo each of them, and then we're ready to take the strut out. The spring off, as we showed you in the previous step, this nut is now able to turn, and then what you need to do is take the tension of the spring. So we've got the spring compressors, you want one each side, make sure they're firmly in the grooves, and then just tighten them up evenly. I think the best way of doing it with these ones is it's the style that fits the 1/2 inch in there, so you can just put tension on, and then just make sure you just go around and then to the back, and make sure you put tension on evenly, and make sure that the spring doesn't pop out the cups. So once you've got a little bit of tension on there, then we can undo the top nut. So this is my setup for the spring compression. I've actually got two sockets on here. I'm just leaving these on just to show you what I did. So you can see there's shooting down to this side of the spring compressors. So once you've compressed it enough, obviously evenly, you can see it's all loose, ready to go. So I can just pluck those out of there if I want. And then to remove the nut, we have a 6mm Allen, but you could actually just use an Allen key as well, but I like using these Allen sockets. And then we have a 17mm ratchet spanner, but of course you could just use a normal spanner, just have to keep on jumping off and on. And you can see I just turn that. Obviously need more than one hand. I can take the whole nut off, and I'll do that. The nuts unwound, then obviously take the nut fully off, and then you have this top hat. Obviously remember how it comes off, and then this little rubber retainer thing, and then I can take off this whole spring assembly is all now loose, so I can take the whole thing off and then put the new spring on. One point that's worth mentioning is that of course I need to untighten these, so I can take my perches, these spring compressors off, and then put them on the new spring. As you can see, here's the new, well, old but new to this car spring, standard ride height. You can notice there's tighter coils at the top and looser coils at the bottom. Also notice that I've got these two little rubber covers. There's one here and there's one round, so there's one that goes from here round to here, and there's one on the second coil going from here round to here. Now what that does to here, what that does is it just stops some noise when, or if these two things clatter against each other or bind, then yeah, it just stops the noise there. So just make sure you just reuse these things. It won't help you if you don't. You'll just get annoying noise. So that's on there. Good point to check the bump stop at this point. Looks alright. You could replace that, of course, at this time. Then we have this, which is like part of the top hat assembly. So we will just dump that in there, and we'll try and put it in the same way as it was before. What you'll see is you'll probably see a witness mark there. So if I just put it back together as it was, because it was working before, so put it like that. Got this little hat thing on there. Lots of crap on top of this thing, but who cares. Then got a top hat, so just chuck that on top of here, just so. Okay. And what you notice is this nut isn't poking out the top yet, but what I'll do is I'll put the spring compressors on first, compress it down, then I'll see the nut head, put the nut back on. So you can see I'm evenly putting tension onto the spring by using these clamps, and so taking tension off the perch. And then you can see here I've got the head of the strut showing. So with the nut I can put that on, and with two hands I can actually push this down a bit more, but you can just make sure that you can definitely see the whole thread. If I do that, it's actually, there's more to go, but just with one hand I can't do that. But yeah, so you can see that's threading up nicely. So then what you do is wind this down with 17mm ratchet spanner, and here I have the Allen key, which is the same one as before, 6mm. Yeah, 6mm. And then I can just tighten it off. Don't go mental, just tighten it off, and then you can release these clamps and then stick it back on the car. Also note there's a certain amount of torque you want to put on so you can still move this freely. Then we're pretty much ready to put it in. Notice there's a longer side between bolts which wants to be in line with, well, facing you when you put it in the car. And then you can hustle it up into there, and then first of all put these retaining nuts at the top hat. So this won't be much of a video with me with one hand and holding it, so you just have to bear with me, but I'm just going to basically thread it up and into that hole. So there we have it, up in there, and tighten those 14mm down with the 3/8. This one seems to be easier to do with the shallow and the others deep, so that's tight. Then we can come down here and then just do the reverse of the taking off. So obviously put this up in here, make sure all of your lines are in the correct way round. So that needs to come around here, for example. Make sure you don't damage any of these. And then I can just simply, not with one hand, but basically place this in here and then crack on. You probably noticed that the top was quite tilted over to me, and that's because the drive shaft had just popped out a little bit. Not popped out of the gearbox, but popped out of itself. That can happen. I could have avoided it with supporting it, but either way, if you put it in first gear and then just rock this back and forward, you can actually just get to pop back in. It's pretty easy. Anyway, so when I've done that, I can then put this lower bolt in, and as promised I put it in this way. So two benefits. One, it means you can actually undo the 22 from this next time and do it up next time properly, which is the first thing. The second thing is obviously the car's going forward most of its life, so all of the crap gets shot in from the front and in here. So if you put it on the back, the idea could be that you're going to cover that nut in less crap. That's just my theory behind it. So yeah, put in the top one and then rock this over. It's actually, if you put the top one in first, it's hard to get the bottom one. So put the bottom one in first, rock it over, get this next one in, and then that's it. And then be a good citizen and get your copper slip, and then just copper slip the thread a little bit, and yeah, you're ready to put the 222 mils on then. So then come in, once you've tightened them up a little bit and then held the 19 on the back, you can come in with the breaker bar and just nip both those up with 22 mils. Then again, copper slipping the thread, and inside here you can put the track rod end on and then just do up that nut on the bottom. Obviously then I want to nip that up, then put a split pin through. So I've tightened up that 17 mil, happened to be, and then split pins through, and all you need to do with a split pin, put it in like so, and then bend one back on itself like that, and then bend one around and over the top of itself, and that is that. Shouldn't go anywhere. Good. There we have it, 12 mil for the Flexi, 10 mil for the ABS sensor, and that's it. That's what it looks like. Side's done. Side one, side two, and then we need to put the wheels back on here and go to the back.